Welcome back for another Kickstarter preview video. Today I'm very excited to show to you the contents and the gameplay and my first impressions from a new game hitting crowdfunding soon, which is called World Order. It's a game from a company that took us by surprise when they launched the first huge smash hit, which was called Hegemony, Lead Your Class to Victory. A fantastic game, fully asymmetric, simulating a game and a battle between different classes and different political aspects that come into the game. I really enjoyed that game. It's had a blast. I presented here in the channel, and I'm sure most of you already know the game because it's a really great success. Now, World Order is a second game out of this company. It's a game about, as the title indicates, World Order. We have the four superpowers, historically put around 2010. We have the United States of America, we have the Federation of Russia, we have China, and we have European Union, as they were in 2010. This is a geopolitical game with a lot of back and forth, with a lot of dynamic, with a lot of interaction between the players, with a lot of layers of strategy. The game has relatively simple rules, it's easy to follow, but the depth of interaction, the depth of interacting with different players, the level of interconnecting with other things in the game is amazing. It's not a wonder because the company and the designers are the same designers, as I said, from Hegemony, Lead Your Class to Victory, and you expect something equally good, so this is no exception. This is a fantastic game. I'm saying my opinion right ahead from the start, but to give you some perspective, because this is an introduction, then I'm going to follow with a full explanation of the videos, and then I'm going to come back at the end with some final thoughts and final impressions from the session I had with the game so far. But to give you some background, the game takes the players and puts them into the shoes of the world leader superpowers of 2010, and through clever card play with multi-use cards, you can do different things. You can ally with countries. You can invest on them and put a foothold on them. You can even create bases on the different countries and trying to get rich to different parts of the different regions of the world and expand. All this is done because we have two scorings on the third and sixth and last round of the game, where players are going to score different things, among them the majority that they have on different regions, because through their actions they're going to be placing cubes on different region boxes, and during the two scorings of the game you're going to try to get majorities there to win points. So far it sounds something relatively simple that we have seen before in other games, and it may give this false impression, but I think this game is very unique because through its simple yet elegant design, it manages to give you a lot of things to consider, to think, to strategize for the long run, to plan ahead without convoluting you with a lot of details, a lot of rules, and a lot of what-if exceptions, etc. Straightforward gameplay, clean design, robust mechanics, and things that feel fresh, innovative, and thematically accurate. It's really important because typically in such games of a geopolitical content, let's say, you could either hit it or miss it, the thematic aspect of the game, and I think in this game they really managed to hit it, and really hard, because the different powers, first of all, feel completely different in the game. What you do has implications and has either short or long-term things that reactions that you can interfere with. You really interact with other players. You have a lot of great things about your economy, how you boost it, how you build it up. It feels different if you play EU, for example, or China, as it should, based on what you would expect thematically. There are also many things here and there that make sense also thematically, in terms of, for example, you cannot go and make allies United States with Iraq. Historically, it makes sense also in the game. Or you cannot create a base on Cuba, for example, for the United States. Things like that you would expect in real life, they really have captured them in the gameplay, and they have put them in such a way that it makes sense and fits the game excellently. Overall, I will tell you more about my opinion at the end of the video, with more details why I think I liked it and why I really enjoyed it, why I think it's going to be a smash hit. Mark my words, I think it's going to be a fantastic success, this game, due to the fact, first of all, that it's easy to teach. It will be seeing a lot of table and play time than other games. Most importantly because, first of all, it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's highly interactive, but also because it's something that you can easily teach to other people and get them quickly in the game. If you have a group of 4 and suddenly one new comes, a new member comes, and we want to play all together, sometimes complex geopolitical games, you need to invest and have a big learning curve, let me put it like that. This one, you can easily get you right into the action, right into the interactions of the game very, very fast. And this is a very plus in my book. So, join me at the table. I'll show you how the game works in practice. I'm going to add, first of all, a link in the description of the video so you can click and go directly to the preview campaign page for the crowdfunding, where you can register so you can be notified when the project launches, if you haven't done that already for some reason. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add timestamps in the description of the video so you can click on different sections of the rules of the chapters and go directly to final scoring, to components, to all different things you want to check. Keep also in mind that I have a separate video already released that shows in depth the components of the game, of the advanced prototype. This is an advanced prototype, but it looks really, really good, as you'll see with me together now. But you can also focus more on the components if you want to see how the components look. And then we'll come back at the end of this video for the final wrap-up and first impressions about the game. So let's see how Word Order plays in practice. The year is 2010, and the world is drastically changing in front of our eyes. While the unrivaled influence of the United States is beginning to wane, other major powers are eagerly stepping onto the stage, ready to claim the piece of the geopolitical pie. In the East, Beijing is rising to become a global powerhouse. Simultaneously, Moscow is entangled in an intricate chess play with Washington, ready to counter its every move. And amidst this tumultuous waters, the European Union is trying to carve out its identity. The world undergoes a drastic shift while power is being redistributed on a global scale. But who will take the lead in this rapidly changing world order? World Order is an area control game for 2 to 4 players that lets you take control of one of the 4 dominant global powers of the 2010s. These are the United States of America, the People's Republic of China, the Russian Federation, and the European Union. Utilize your diplomatic finesse, your economic strength, and your military might to expand your influence across the globe. Form alliances through sharp negotiation, entice other nations through clever economic dependencies, or become the military juggernaut that no one dares to mess up with. Join the race for a global hegemony and show the other powers that a new era is dawning. Now, before we do anything else, let's familiarize ourselves with the components of this advanced prototype. Keep in mind that, again, this is an advanced prototype. Even though it looks gorgeous, everything you see in front of you may be keen to changes for the final production once the game is successfully funded on crowdfunding, on Kickstarter, which I'm sure of it. It's going to be a smash hit. But let's see quickly the components of the game. First of all, we have the main board, which you see in front of you. It has a global map showing the region and the continents for the different locations. It's a global map, as you can see. It's also color coded. It has different sections for influence cubes, for countries and cards, and has also the round tracker, as you can see here. Last but not least, we have the turn order, which is here for each round, and it's dictated according to the game rules. The next thing that we have are the 4 player boards. Player boards are both asymmetric because they have unique aspects for each of the powerhouses, but also they're different colors and they have different let's say production values and different also starting points for the production, but also they're recessed, really nice, and they have different colors together matching the player components. As you can see, from left to right you can find the European Union with yellow, the People's Republic of China with red, United States of America with blue, and Russian Federation with gray-white. Now, the next thing that we have is 48 starting ability cards. These are 12 per player. Each player starts the game with their unique deck of ability cards. These have the same back like the main market ability cards that we're going to use as a pool for enriching and deck building our decks. It has large cards, 12 of them. You know that they belong to your powerhouse, your global power that you're playing, because they have the flag here. This is the European Union. You see, all of these have the flag on the right, so you can easily see that these belong to the European Union. For example, China, as you can see, they also have their own 12 ability cards that you have here. okay, and they have their flag. Another important aspect for the starting cards, we have 6 plus 6. We have 6 with a blue triangle here, as you can see next to the title. These are the 6 recommended to put in your hand to begin with the game from the complete 12 deck of each powerhouse. But if it's not your first game, you can just shuffle them and just take 6 randomly. Now, the next thing I want to mention that we have in the game is a plethora of components going to the 66 market ability cards, similar like our starting decks. There is a variety of cards that are used to create a market on display with 6 offered cards, from which at the end of each round you can spend research points to gain more cards and do the deck building. By the way, they go on top of your draw deck pile. That means they will immediately come into your hand the next round, which I love in games. A variety of cards with similar characteristics like your starting deck. It's just that they're more powerful and more versatile because they have more ways to be utilized through the course of the game. Now, this is a deck of the market ability cards, and there are 66 in total. The next thing I want to mention are the 20 strategic asset cards. These are 5 per player. Again, this is part of the setup of each player. Each player has 5 starting cards, strategic assets. They have their starting flag here. So for the United States are these 5. For European Union, 5 more. 5 for China, and 5 for Russia. Now, from those 2, as part of the setup, we'll explain more later, you just draw randomly 2, and these are going to be 2 powerful boosts that you can use instead of spending a card, discarding a card, and instead of using the card, the action card, you can use this, flip it, and do, for example, the US Navy, okay, which is a powerful boost. And you have 2 cards for the duration of the whole game. These are called strategic assets. They are very thematic, and they also give a lot of interesting abilities and options to use when the timing is right. Next, we have 16 starting country cards, 4 for each player. For example, you can see here the ones with Russia. I've laid them out here. So 1, 2, 3, 4 are the 4 starting cards. These are similar with the country cards that you see throughout the board, scattered in region for East Asia, for South Asia, Africa, etc., etc. The difference is that they have the flag of the card, the powerhouse, on the top right. So this belongs to the 4 set of the starting 4 countries that they have allied already with Russia in this case. Okay, and typically you put them above your player board during setup, but here I'm trying to squeeze everything in the video frame. The next thing that we have, and these are 4 for each player. Okay, so for example, EU has 4 also, same for China, same for States. Then we have 72 map country cards. These are already placed to expedite setup, but theoretically, as you can see, they're color coded by region. So this is the Middle East, North Africa deck. It has a variety of countries falling in this region. Okay, that they are potential allies or investment targets for the countries, etc., etc., or military expansion. In any case, we are setting them up per location. These are color coded. If you look closely, there's the same color, green in this case, border, to indicate that this is the location for the Middle East, North Africa region. This is for the Africa region, different color and different box, and the same goes here and here. The total number of cards is 72, and this excludes the 16 4 per player countries that they come into the player's starting setup and influence. Next, we have 4 trade policy cards, 1 for each player. Again, this is different. For example, it's slightly different depending on the country. It shows the number of exports and imports you can do. More on that later. Okay, it's a reminder. It shows that this belongs to US, but there is a different one for each country. And for example, the respective one from China has 3 exports to indicate the asymmetry and the nature of China. Then the next thing that we have is 8 commerce cards. These are 2 per player. This is a very interesting mechanic of the game. We'll explain it later. So people can do trade and gain resources from you. So instead of gain directly the resources that you have produced, and that means you lose them and you cannot use them when the time comes, the designers have implemented this system, which is really nice. You have two cards that you can flip, so if someone forces you to trade with them, you're going to gain the money, so instead of paying the bank, they're going to pay you, but you flip these cards to show that you gave them the resources. These are not part of the resources you track on your player board here. You know, here on the bottom of our player board we track the resources. This is indicates like strategic amounts of produced resources that you already have ready for commerce, okay? And this can be refreshed again through the course of the game. Again, color coded, yellow for European Union, red for the People's Republic of China, and so on, 2 per player. We have 20 growth cards. These are the cards you see here, which are divided into similar decks of numbers through 1 to 5. So we have 2 decks of 1, 2 decks of 2, 2 decks of 3, 2 decks of 4, and 2 decks of 5. This is one of the aspects of the game. You can exchange resources, coins, and whatever the card requires to go from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, from 3 to 4, and from 4 to 5 to gain very powerful abilities and victory points progressively more and more. For example, if you take the industrial development, you take 2 victory points. If you reach all the way to the Olympic Games, you take 18. Okay, and so on. We have 2 per number, and if you get them, you need to take them subsequently from one number to the next, one level to the next. Then we have the auto influence cards. This is this deck here. This is a very interesting mechanic. If you're playing less than 4 players, you open 2 cards per missing power in the game, and this dictates where the missing powers are going to place cubes for influence, or even tanks for military presence, and this emulates the actions of players, physical players, missing from the total number of 4 to make it equally pressing and interesting for the players. The next thing that we have is the 28 production markers. We have 7 blue, 7 red, 7 yellow, 7 white. Okay, these are markers that they are used to indicate the production. Essentially, you see them here. Okay, we have 98 influence cubes. Again, 23 blue, red, yellow, white, and black. All the component for each powerhouse, each side, are color coded. So the cubes are yellow for EU, red for China, etc. So you use the cubes, you see, to indicate markers in your recessed board for the production of oil, ore, or food. Okay. But you also have cubes to place them for a majority and area control on the different regions through the course of the game. You also have resource markers that you see here at the bottom. You have respectively oil, food, ore, diplomacy, mobile phones, etc. This is your warehouse, so the production is here, and once you produce them, you increase the amount of stored resources you have on the bottom of your player board. More on that later. We also have the round marker, which is here, tracking the 6 rounds of the game. This game lasts all the way up to 6 rounds. We have the army markers, again color coded, 15 per player. So for example, these are the army markers of Russia, which has a white color. Okay, it shows a tank for military strength. These are the military markers, army markers as they're called. We have focus markers. These are cylinders in the 4 colors again of the major powers. These are the cylinders. And the focus is something really interesting in the game mechanics. We'll explain that later. But here we start the game with domestic focus, but we can change it to diplomatic focus or to military focus through the course of the game and from round to round, which gives us the ability to adapt really dynamically to what other players are doing and to implement our plans for winning the game. Then we have the prosperity markers, which is a cylinder. It sits here. This is a prosperity track. We're going to analyze the player board more in detail, but this is a cylinder that you have the ability to provide at the end of the round mobile phones or devices or luxuries, if you want to say, to your nation, and gain respectively coins, which is money, and victory points. Okay, but you cannot move more than 1 per round. So if you want to move all the way to the end, you need to be making sure to move each round 1 step. The next thing that we have are energy markers, raw material markers, food markers, consumable good markers, services markers, the briefcase, diplomacy markers, the green one, okay, and all of them create the markers that each player has, one of each type, at their player board. The next thing that we have are the base tokens, 24 base tokens and 25 for FDI tokens, the foreign direct investment. These are the base tokens, so you can create bases on different countries, or you can invest with a foreign direct investment token, and these are tokens to track these, that they go above the cards of the countries that you acquire above you or in front of you. Last but not least, we have the turn order markers, which are here to indicate the turn order in this track, one for each country or powerhouse, I should say. And then the last thing that we have are 3 majority tokens. We have a scoring at the end of the 3rd round and at the end of the 6th round, and you have majority for military presence, for coins, and for allied countries that reward different amount of points, and depending on the number of players you can have it from one side or the other depending on the player count. And the last thing, of course, that we have are the score markers that they go on the top of the scoreboard, which goes all around the main board of the game, and 80 coins in 4 denominations of 1, 5, 10 and 20. So these are all the components of the game, of the prototype, at least in its prototype form. So let's move forward. Oh, I forgot to mention, we have some fantastic play rates, one per powerhouse, which has both the research turn, the round overview, some special situations or rules per country. The majority of the play rate is the same for each country, but you get asymmetry more from the course of the gameplay, as you'll see down the road. And here is diplomatic actions explained, military actions explained, economic actions explained, and domestic actions explained, and trade. And these are color coded, and this is used throughout the action cards of the game. Very interesting. Per country, as you'll see, play rates which come with the game. So this now concludes all the components of the prototype. Now a bit of close zoom up on some of the components, because they all make more sense throughout the explanation of these rules. This is the player board. It's different per player. This is an example for the European Union up close. This is an example of countries of different levels. You can see the level of each country on this number. 3, 1, 3 and 3, for example, or 2 for Nigeria here, and they're color coded to match the color of the region. So South Africa has purple, or East Asia Pacific has this light blue color, and so on. And these are some examples of country cards. These are some examples of ability cards from the ability market deck. You can see that they have different types based on the color of the banner. This is a military ability card, the red one, the purple, the orange one is an economic one, the green one is a diplomatic one, and you also have the blue one. So these are the 4 different colors that the blue ones are the domestic ones, that they go on the action cards, on the ability cards as they're called, and they dictate the nature of the card itself, but more on that later. These are examples of growth cards. You see they have a different number on the top, which indicates the level. You start from 1 and go all the way up to 5, and for each number, each level, you have 2 types. So for example, for level 2 you have the reduced bureaucracy and the knowledge transfer, and when you decide to take level 2, meaning you already had a level 1, you go to level 2, you can pick one or the other, okay, and then you're eligible to go to level 3, 4 and 5 subsequently. Last but not least is an example of a trade policy card, which has the number of exports and imports that you can do, and these 2 belonging to EU because they're yellow are examples of the commerce cards that you have. When someone does trade with you, you flip those if they are available, to show that you don't spend the actual resources. You just flip the card, and then when you produce, you also reactivate them so they are available, but you cannot spend them on your own when you do something else. This is only for the trade initiated by other players. Setup. Now, the setup is pretty straightforward, and the fact that everything is color coded really helps a lot. So the first thing we do is we place the main board in the center of the table, in a convenient space reachable from everybody. Then we separate the map country cards by region, meaning by color, which indicates a specific region, as you can see. And we shuffle each region card separately and place it on the left side of the corresponding deck, meaning we take the pile, we shuffle it, we place it on the left side, and then we take the first card from the pile, place it on the right side of the box, so you have a whole face up deck and the first card also face up revealed there. You do that for each region on the map, and then you have in that way two displayed countries from each region already on setup. Two cards are visible in each region. The next thing we do is we place in each region its starting influence cubes, as indicated on the colors of the on the slots on the board, and the round marker on the first space of the track. So the round marker goes here. I remind you, this is the side for the round marker, and here, for example, you see this has a pre-printed blue spot, so we place a blue cube. Pre-printed yellow spot, we place a yellow cube. Same for red, same for white on top, and we have two spaces with black cubes. These are the neutral powers, let's say, independent powers, and we place all of those on the map according to the pre-printed colors in the squares per each region. The next thing we do is we place the three majority tokens on the board with the side corresponding to the number of players face up. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, remind you, this is a side. If we're playing with two players, we're using this side, otherwise we're using this one. Next thing we do is we shuffle the market ability cards. This is the deck here, but I couldn't squeeze everything in the video, but just to show the display of the market, you're going to have the deck, and then you're going to have 6 market cards face up, one next to the other, creating thus the market with the ability cards. The next thing we do is we separate all the growth cards by name and place them in piles above the board in numerical order, starting from 1 all the way to 5. Keep in mind that not all piles have the same number of cards. For example, the number 5 is a single card, the number 1 has more copies. So again, I squeeze it a bit like that, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and below it's again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is how we set up the growth cards. Now, the next thing we do is we make piles of coins, have them here on top. We make piles of the base tokens and the FDI for the investment, direct investment, the foreign direct investment, close by. And then we have each player collecting all their pieces in their color to prepare their player area. Have each player choose one of the player roles, US, China, Russia and EU, and take its corresponding player board, starting ability cards, matching their color and their faction, starting country cards. Remember, each country, its power starts with 4 countries, starting countries, and you have their power flag there. Okay, so 4 for EU, 4 for China, etc., etc. Then you have the trade policy card specific to EU. So check here on the top right to see which country it belongs to. We have the 2 commerce cards, again with the flag of your powerhouse. Okay. And then we take all the army markers, the markers for the production, the food, the ore, the oil, the mobile devices, the services, and the diplomacy. We place the prosperity here on the starting slot of the prosperity track. Then we take the focus marker and we place it on the domestic focus. Okay, and the next thing we do is we take the production cubes, which essentially are same. I don't know if it's going to be same for the prototype and the production and the final production, but they are similar with the influence cubes you have for the area majority on the map. You locate for each of the production track the pre-printed square with your color for your faction, and you place 1 production cube there. You do this for all the materials that you produce, if they are primary materials like the top row, which is oil, ore and food, or if they are secondary materials, which are mobile phones, services and diplomacy and military. So once you've done that, you have placed everything you need to do on your player board, and the next thing you need to do is you need to take starting resources. So you take each country, it's different, each country, its powerhouse takes the amount of resources, for example food, equal to their starting production value. So food for EU is 2, that means that the food marker is going to start on 2. It's from 0 to 10. If you have more than 10, you lose, you don't get more than 10. On the other side, for example, diplomacy starts on 4 for EU. That means I'm going to place the diplomacy marker 4, indicating that I have 4 diplomacy, 2 food, 1 oil, and so on. Now for setup, I know I have squeezed everything here for the video, but I am just clarifying it here. Your starting cards, the ones that they have your powerhouse flag, remember you have 4, it's recommended that those 4 you place them above your player board here, and any new countries you ally with, you also place them above. Okay, for this video I have squeezed everything, you know, as much as possible, just to make sure that I have a nice view for you to see everything on the video. But from efficiency point of view and from functionality point of view, you're going to have both your starting countries, but also the ones that you ally with later down the road, above your player board. Now, small detail, if you're playing 3 or 4 players, you use both your commerce cards. If you're playing 2 players, you only use 1 commerce card. Now, the next thing that we do is we take our starting ability cards. I remind you there are 12 with the flag of our country or our powerhouse, and then we shuffle them and create 2 piles of 6 cards. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 6. Okay, so 6 plus 6. So we have 2 piles of 6 from the 12 starting ability cards that we have. And once we've done that, then from the 2 piles of the 6 cards, we look at the cards in each pile and choose one as your starting hand, so either this or that. So I examine both of the piles and I choose one of the decks with the 6 cards as my starting hand. Okay, that's the normal setup, but as the game recommends, we have some of the cards, as you remember, that they have 6 of them in detail, that they have this icon. So the game says that if it's your first game with word order, take those 6 ones with the blue arrow and you select these 6 cards to be your starting hand. Okay, and the remaining 6 form your deck. So the 6 ones will be, these 6 ones will be your starting hand, and this is going to be your deck. Next, each powerhouse takes their 5 strategic cards with their flag. Okay, they shuffle them, they draw 2 at random, they return the remaining 3 to the box. Okay, and from those 2 you just place them below your player board, face up, so these are ready for you to use. And as you'll see in the course of the game, instead of playing an ability card for the card itself, you can play, discard it, and then use one of those cards for the boost that it provides once in a game, and then flip it down. You can do this, both of them, if you want, in the course of the game. Okay, but during setup you're going to have 2 strategic assets below your player board as part of your setup, and you're not going to gain any more in the course of the game. One last thing, with the 2 selected strategic asset cards that you have, you're going to gain that many victory points from the sum of, in this case, 1 plus 5, 6. That means that the United States, the blue marker, is going to go on the VP track and update their VP starting points to a total number of 6, because they have those 2 cards. Okay, so this is how each powerhouse, depending on the 2 strategic assets they have, they will be getting the starting points respectively. Okay, what you see in front of you is the yellow board for you. So let's say I draw 2 strategic assets for you, so this and that. That means I will take EU. We're going to start with 5 plus 2, 7 victory points on the victory point track, which means EU starts with 7 victory points. As the last thing for setup, every player starts, or every faction or every powerhouse starts with a different amount of starting coins. This is the number of, for EU, for example. You see it at the top on the right side of the player board above the resource track. So in this case 25, that means EU is going to start with 25 coins as their starting capital, which they place somewhere nearby next to their components. Last, if you're playing with 4 players, you return the auto-influence cards back to the game box. You will not be using them. But if you're playing with fewer than 4 players, you draw 2 auto-influence cards for every role that is not in the game. It's not taken by an actual player, that is. You place influence cubes on these colors next to their roles flags, as well as army tokens if it's indicated in the cards. So let's say that no one selected, we have 3-player game, no one selected the United States. That means that you need to place cubes, 2 cubes in East Asia Pacific, and 2 military tokens. Okay, this I didn't shuffle the deck, but let's say it was like that, and we don't have the United States playing from a physical player in the game. That means we draw these 2 cards for the US player missing, and we place 1 on Central Asia and 1 in East Asia Pacific, and respectively 1 and 1 military token there also. But if you're playing 4 players, you don't need the auto influence cards, and you just return them to the box. The next thing we do is we take the 4 turn order tokens and place them next to the turn order track on the board. The player with the fewest starting victory points on the board places their token on the space of their choice on the track. We continue doing this for all players in reverse VP order, and in case of a tie, the player with the fewest starting money chooses first. So in this case, for example, the player with the least victory points would be US, so they can decide to go all the way from the first to last. Okay, then EU chooses, then let's say Russia chooses, China chooses, and then the Federation of Russian Federation chooses picks the remaining position. So this is how we have the starting order. How to play? The game plays over 6 rounds, and each round is divided into phases. We have the preparation phase, the action phase, and the aftermath. I remind you that all these are illustrated on the player aid also. So you can see we have the preparation phase, the action phase, and last the aftermath. Each of the 6 rounds is going to have all of those 3 phases. Now, with the exception of the first round, which we start directly from the action phase. Through the course of the game, we will place influence cubes. These are these cubes here the players have. They're going to be placing influence cubes on the different regions on the board, which will grant you victory points. In addition, you gain victory points based on who has the most influence in each region during the 2 games scoring intervals at the end of the 3rd and at the end of the 6th round. At the end of the 6th round, the player with the most victory points will be the winner. Now let's talk about the preparation phase. This phase is skipped during the first round. If it is the first time you're checking the rules or learning the game, it may be better to skip to the next phase and come back when you have understood what happens in the next phases and have a better understanding of how the game plays. But keep in mind that in the preparation phase, you perform the following steps. Keep in mind also that these steps can be performed simultaneously by all players to save time. If, however, it's important for 1 or more players to see what the others are doing, use the regular turn order to perform them, with each step fully carried over by all players moving to the next one. So the first thing that we do, and again we have the player aid, which has the breakdown for the preparation phase. So the first thing that we do is we draw cards. So we draw 6 cards from your deck. If at any moment there are no cards to draw from, you shuffle your discard pile and form a new deck, and you continue drawing cards from that one. Then you move to the reveal country cards, which is the second step of the preparation phase. In each region, you take the top card of the left pile of the country and move it to the top of the right side of the pile. If at the end of this process you end up placing the last card from the left pile to the right, you move the single pile you now have to the left side, where you place the top card to the right side again. This way you make sure that new offer of countries are provided in each round. The next thing we do is we determine the turn order. We slide the turn order marker slightly downwards, and then the player with the fewest victory points places their turn order token on the space of their choice on the track. Then we continue doing so with the other players in reverse victory point order. In case of a tie, the players with the fewest money among those tied chooses first. If there is still a tie, the player who placed first in the previous round chooses first now. The next thing we do is we produce primary resources. We produce primary resources. We have all of our 3 primary resources, which are the top of the board. You see, oil, ore, and food. These are on the top of the board. We have all these 3 producing. For each resource we get as many as its production cube indicates, moving the corresponding marker in the resource track accordingly. And if you ever end up having more than 10 resources, you leave the marker on the 10th space. All extra resources are ignored. For example, if I would produce now in this step, I will gain 1 oil for the primary of China, 1 ore, 1, 2, 3 ore, 1, 2, 3 ore. Actually, you don't see that. Let me zoom down. I would gain 1 oil, so 1, 3 ore, so 1, 2, 3, and 3 food, so 1, 2, 3 respectively. And the last thing that we'll do is we're going to choose focus. I'm talking still about the preparation phase. So after producing primary resources, we're going to choose focus. Now focus, you can be either domestic focus. We start with domestic focus the first round, and then you can decide to be diplomatic focus, military focus, or domestic focus. You choose where you want to focus this round among the 3 available options, so 1, 2, 3, domestic focus, diplomatic, and military focus. You move the focus marker on the board accordingly and then perform the instructions listed there in order. So for example, for the domestic focus, I would ready 1 country. If it's flipped down, I will refresh it. You may spend 6 coins to increase any one of your productions by 1. And then you produce, as indicated here, and you gain an ongoing ability, which is 2 research points for your research turn down the road. When you finish your actions, you can have 2 additional research points to buy new cards from the market, essentially. Okay, this is specifically for the domestic focus, but that's the step. You decide focus and you execute the routine in the box of the appropriate focus you've chosen. Keep in mind that some instructions allow you to increase production on your player board. If you choose to do so, you pay the listed cost and move the corresponding production marker 1 space forward. Also note that if you increase the production of a primary resource, this way, energy, raw materials, or food, immediately you gain 1 of that resource. Okay, so if I increase this one, I immediately gain 1 ore in this way. If an instruction tells you to produce a secondary resource, consumables, I used to call them mobile phones, but these are consumables, or services, the briefcase icon, or diplomacy here, you may produce as many items of that resource as the number indicated by the production cube. For example, I can produce consumables China 4 because the marker is here on 4. So I can produce up to 4, but keep in mind, for each secondary resource that you need to produce, you need to spend the corresponding requirements listed next to it. Okay, so you need to be able to spend the requirements needed for the secondary resources accordingly. If you focus again here, you can see the icons here for the consumables. For example, if you want to produce for each consumable good you want to produce, you can produce up to 4. Okay, but for each of those 4, you need to spend 1 energy, 1 oil, and 1 material, 1 ore, to create 1 mobile phone or consumable, how it's called. So let's say I can do it all the way 4 times. So for each of those I can produce, I need to spend 1 oil, so 1 oil plus 1 ore, okay, to produce 1 consumable. This is how it works. And you can do this up to the total number of your production for that specific resource, in this case the consumables. Keep in mind about a word about the commerce cards, which each country has the commerce cards. Whenever you produce a resource that is listed on your commerce cards, you turn all those cards that were face down from previous rounds face up, so that you have it there. Okay, it's that means that they represent produced resources that they have been allocated for the use for the trade specifically. Okay, so you cannot spend them, but you just refresh them when you produce the next time you produce this material for you, in this case consumables for China. Also note that the last instruction in each focus section, which is a bullet, in this case gain 2 research points for each research turn, has an ongoing ability that you do not perform at this moment but applies during the whole round. In this round, for example, everybody starts with a domestic in the first round with a domestic focus. That means at the end of the round they will gain +2 extra research points for acquiring cards from ability cards from the market. Now the second phase of each round is the action phase. We said preparation phase, action phase and aftermath. We are at the action phase of the round. This is a phase in which most of the game takes place. You play cards from your hands, affecting the board game and pursuing your agenda. You then get to add new cards to your deck, if you like, and build your deck accordingly. This phase takes place in 2 steps. We have the actions and the research step. So first we all do the actions one by one by playing cards, and then we proceed to the research step where we acquire new cards, those who want to acquire new cards. The first player in turn order takes the first turn. Now let's see the actions. You choose one of the cards in your hand, and I remind you, you start each round with 6 cards in your hand. You review them, and based on your plans you select one which you're going to play in front of you and above your player board or next to your player board. You choose one of the cards in play and you play it for its effect. If you can't apply the full effect listed, this is just an example, if you can apply the full effect listed, you just do as much as possible from the card. And the card then stays in front of you. You do not put it in the discard pile yet. Instead of playing a card and applying its effect, you may choose to do one of the following options. Remember that we had 2 strategic assets selected at the beginning of the game. So instead of playing a card and applying its effect, you may choose to do one of these. You may play a strategic asset. So you place face down in front of you an action card from your hand, if able, and apply its effect and apply the effect of one of your available face-up strategic cards. So you have 2. So you still play a card and then you apply this effect. Okay, so I just play this card face up. I don't do the effect of the card, but I do the arms export. In this case, choose a region, sell 2 army tokens for 20 coins, and add 1 influence to that region. Okay, pretty thematic also for the United States. So that's the one option. Or you can pass. You place face down in front of you an action card, if you pass, from your hand, and get 10 coins. So let's say I don't want to do what any of my cards do, or I'm alone cash. I play it in front of me face down and I gain 10 coins from the bank. After you have performed your action, either the card's effect or one of the available options, meaning the strategic asset or pass for 10 coins, then it's your turn is over, and it's the next player's turn in track turn order, meaning if USA was playing first, then it's going to be EU, then Russia, then China, according to this turn order. Keep in mind that the next player in turn takes their turn. They get to play a card or discard the card for one of the 2 options, and this goes on until you have all played or discarded for the respective strategic asset or coins, meaning pass or strategic option. In any case, utilized 4 out of your 6 cards you have in the round hand. So in the round hand you have 6 cards. So one by one we're going to perform one action, either for the effect or doing any of the 2 options I listed. Once every player does that, we go to the next player. So once you've done this 4 times, you're going to end up with 2 cards in your hand. Okay. You will have played 4 actions, and as soon as you've done that, you proceed to the research step, which we're going to explain later. The action cards in front of you serve as a reminder of how many actions you have taken so far in the round. So you know that if you have played face up in front of you 3 cards, you know that you still need to play a 4th and last card when it's your turn, and that ends your actions for the round. The action cards allow you to perform a variety of things which belong in the 4 categories which are color coded from the side of the card. Again, you have diplomatic actions with the green banner. You have economic actions with the orange banner. You have domestic actions with the blue banner, and we don't have here, but you may acquire more, or this one, for example, with the red one, is a military action with a red banner. Through the course of the game, you may acquire more cards, but you will see that they may have more than one banner. Okay, you see, this is both a diplomatic and a military banner. Okay, that means that you can do your actions have both military and diplomatic effects in your play in a way. So going back to the color coding, you see in your player aid you have the military actions, the diplomatic actions, the economic actions, and the domestic actions. And here you have also keywords for each card, so improve relations, engage, move army, build base, trade, invest, get a growth card, or produce. Okay, so again, these are part of the actions that you can do. Okay, so we'll go into more detail on explaining how this is done. Keep in mind that some of the actions allow you to place influence on a region. We'll explain how this is done later, but for the moment let's start with each of the color, each of the type of actions, and have a better understanding of how they work. Okay, so we start with the diplomatic green actions. So we have the improve relations. They are the diplomatic cards which have the improved relations with the country on the board. So this action allows you to improve your relations with foreign countries and form new allies. You can even use existing alliances to help establish new ones, make it easier, that is. So you choose an available country on the board. That means the top, either the top card on the pile or the one to the right. Let's say my focus is here on East Asia Pacific, so I can either select Australia or Japan, so the top one from the pile on the left or the top one from the pile on the right. Okay, and this progresses down the road. I can go in any region I want, okay, but let's say my focus goes East Asia Pacific for this example. So I select one country. I pay diplomacy equal to the country's value number in the hexagon on the top left side of the card and place it face up in front of me together with the 4 starting countries I have. So this would be my 5th one if it's the first one I improve relationships with. And now it is considered to be an allied country, similar like the 4 starting ones. So let's say I want to take Australia. I will need to pay 3 diplomacy because you have 3 in this hex. That means I will go down on my player board, spend 3 diplomacy, so 1, 2, 3, and acquire this card, place it together with the 4 ones that I have above my player board. Okay, my starting ones. This is going to be the next one, face up, not face down, this is exhausted, the darker side, and this is going to be considered now an allied country for me moving forward. If you have other allied countries of the same region, you may decide to exhaust them, turn them face down. To lower the diplomacy cost you need to pay. Each country you exhaust lowers the diplomacy cost by an amount equal to its value. Okay, so let's say in the previous example, again, I had 3 diplomacy. I need to make allies. That means play the card for improving relations, okay, making new allies with Australia. So to get it as an allied country I need to pay 3 diplomacy. I can pay a combination between diplomacy resources that I have and flipping other countries of the same region. You see, they belong to the blue region, which is the East Asia Pacific. So this one is in front of me already, so I can flip it face down, which gives me 1 value. It could be 1, 2, or 3. So instead of spending 3, I will spend 1 plus 1, 2, for a total of 3 required for the diplomacy for this country to come and join me with the other countries I have allied with me. If you improve relations with a country you already have in front of you, one of the 4 starting countries you have, you place the new card face up on top of the previous card, slightly upwards, so that both cards' trade symbols are visible, and keep any base or FDI tokens it had. You may then immediately exhaust to add 1 influence to that country's region. Also keep in mind that some countries do not allow some players to improve their relationships with them. This is a thematic aspect of the game. If a country features a forbidding symbol over a player's flag in that upper right corner, then that means that you cannot choose to perform this action with this country. For thematic reasons, you cannot become allies with this country. Just an example of this, for Iran, you see there is the flag of the United States with a cross out symbol. That means United States can never improve relations with Iran and make them an ally. Okay, there are some combinations in the game, which of course are very thematic. Another diplomatic action that you have besides improving relations is engaging. So you can play a card to engage in a region. Again, this is a diplomatic action because it has a green banner. So very simple, when you decide to engage, this action allows you to cement your influence in a region through your diplomatic ties. Very simple, you choose a region on the board, whichever you want, you pay the diplomacy cost listed there and add 1 influence to that region. If you have other allied countries in the same region, similarly you may exhaust them, turn them face down to lower the diplomacy cost you need to pay. Each card you exhaust lowers the diplomacy cost requirements by the amount equal to its value, similarly like before. So let's see how this works. If China wanted to engage in this region, South Asia, they will need to pay 4 diplomacy, because it says 4 here in this box. If it goes Middle East, North Africa, it will be 6, or Africa 3, and so on. Okay, East Asia Pacific 5, and so on and so on. So if I want to engage specifically here, I would need to play the engage in a region card, obviously, and then I will be able to engage in a region, which means I would spend 4 diplomacy, or a combination of diplomacy stored in my player board plus exhausting allied countries to contribute their value for reducing this amount, like we've seen before, and then I would be able to place 1 influence cube wherever I want and get this amount of points. We'll explain how influence works later, but this is how you do engage in a region. Then let's move to the economic cards actions that you can play. The ones with the orange color. When you play this consists of trading, so you can play this card to trade, or you can play this card to invest. Okay, so let's see how each of those works respectively. So let's say you decide to do economic action, which is an orange one, and you want to trade. You need to play a trade card, or a card that gives you trade, like this one. Okay, and this action allows you to trade with other countries and generate income, or get access to resources that you can't produce yourself in a sufficient quantity based on your plans and requirements. Whenever you perform this action, you can perform a number of export, selling, and import buying transactions. The exact number of transactions of each type you can perform is listed on your trade policy card, which is unique per country, per powerhouse, and most players can perform up to 2 exports and 2 imports in that order, with China performing 1 more of each. Okay, and you can see that here on this card, China has exports of 3 and imports of 3. Okay, and it shows what you can get from the other, let's say, powerhouses. To perform an import transaction, first of all, let's see how you perform the export transaction. So when you perform the export transaction, you choose a resource and count the number of times its symbol appears on your allied countries, regardless of if they are exhausted or available. So let's see, these are the countries that I have allied. It could be the starting ones plus additional ones that I have increased diplomatic relationships, and they are my allies. Okay, so I count on all of these cards the symbols that I want to that I have. So let's say I'm focusing on oil. Okay, or let's say I want to focus on consumables. Okay, so if I was to focus on consumables, I would count, these are the 2 countries I have in front of me, which have the consumable icon, as you can see. That means I have 2 icons. Okay, so the resources to export are always on the left side, and they don't have an arrow pointing downwards. So okay, this consumable is for import. Okay, this is not for export. So I count the icons, the big icons, the large icons on the left side. You may not have the right side, okay, without arrow, let's say. So in this case, I'm focusing on consumables. So I have 1 + 1, 2. Then this is in the large section of the bottom right of the cards, as I mentioned. Then you may sell that many copies of the resource. So I can sell up to 2, okay, because I have that many icons. Respectively, to perform an import transaction, I choose a resource and count the number of types its symbol appears to the small section of your allied countries with the arrow pointing towards you, or on your trade policy card, getting it from other players. You may buy that many copies of that resource, and keep in mind that you cannot export and import the same number of resources, okay? So let's say I wanted to import ore, okay? I would count the 2 icons of ore, or for materials, how they're called, that I have on the right side of the card, if I had this card in front of me, okay? So again, the left side is the number of resources, the type of resources you export. The right side, if any, they are the number of the type of resources and the icons that contribute to that you import. Now, for the cost of the respective resources, coins you need to gain or pay, depending if you're doing export or import. You take your player aid, you flip it, and then you go to this table. And this table, as you can see, it has the export gain amount you get and the import cost, the amount you pay. So let's say in the previous example I was going to export 2 consumable. I can see that for China, that means that they are for 15 and 15. So if I have 2 icons on the allied countries, so 1 plus 1, 2, I can export 2, so I can export 2 consumables for 15 coins, okay, each, for a total of 30. Again, keep in mind that when you import, you can either import from the countries that have this icon, the allied countries that have this icon and the arrow towards you, or from the other powerhouses. In this case, you pay the cost to them directly instead of the bank, okay? But again, let's focus on the transaction table. When you're importing, in order to buy from another player, the player must have that resource available for you. If the player has a commerce card showing that resource, turn that card face down. So let's say I wanted to get services, okay? I would import them from EU. I would flip, EU player would flip these cards if they are available, and they have these cards, if they have the resource available, and these cards are face up. Okay, then giving the corresponding amount to that player, and if that player does not have a face-up commerce card with that resource, then you can only buy it if they are available on their board, in which case they reduce their quantity accordingly, okay, because if they have the card they just flip it, but if they have the cards already flipped, they reduce the amount of from their warehouse accordingly from the bottom of the player. And if the player does not have any of that resource on the board and there is no face-up commerce cards, you simply cannot buy it from them for this run. Respectively, whenever you import, also if you end up buying from one of the other players, you also gain 1 diplomacy, so you increase your diplomacy by 1 because you traded with, you imported with from at least 1 other player. Doesn't matter if you imported from all 3 of them or for 2 of them, you only progress 1 diplomacy up regardless. Know that in 2 or 3 player games you may still buy from countries not controlled by an actual player. However, you don't get any diplomacy in those cases. So this is how you do the trade, and you do it strategically, obviously, either to gain money if you export from something you have and you want to sell, or to import something that you are missing and you want it for your plans moving onwards. So having said that, and this is also explained here on the player aid really nicely, having said that, let's now progress to see how the invest works, which is the other second action that I wanted to show you, and it is here. You see, we did trade. You can also do invest. Now, how Invest works is very simple. This action allows you to finance large-scale projects in foreign countries. Such projects not only do they bring you long-term financial gains, they also help you establish a foothold in that region. You choose a ready allied country in front of you. That means you need to have it as allied country. You need to have that country in front of you, already allied, so together with the allied countries you have there, so you need to have it, okay? And once you selected the one that it's of interest to you from the ones above your player board, then what you do is you turn it face down and pay the amount of money listed on the top of the card right beneath its value. Meaning, again, in the Brazil, if it was allied to me and I want to invest in Brazil, I need to pay 20 coins and flip it. And that means I would be able to invest in Brazil. Okay, the number is different depending on the country. And to indicate that I have investment, a long plan investment on Brazil, above my card, Brazil, I will place one of these investment tokens. This is a reminder because it will pay me off at the end of each round, as you'll see. So that's how you perform a foreign direct investment, FDI as it's called. You place a token above the country, and as a reminder, and you also at this time, that's also important, that's how you place a foothold on that country. You place one influence cube in that country's region. So I would go to South America and place one of my cubes on the board and gain the, like we'll see later how placing influence works, gain the victory points and increase the chances for scoring for majority at round 3, end of round 3 or end of round 6. So these are the two economic actions. Now let's proceed to see the military actions. For the military actions, again captured really nicely on the player aid, you can either move an army or build base. These are the keywords on your military action cards. So let's see first of all how you move an army. Okay, so for example, if you play this card, you're going to gain one army token, and you may move, that's a keyword, move up to 2 army tokens. This action allows you to move your armies around the world, tipping the balance to your favor. Keep in mind that you start with some army tokens, and the rest are the pool that you need to produce in order to have them available. What's on your board is available to you, what's off the board is stock to be produced. So this action allows you to move your army around the world, tipping the balance to your favor, as I said, and you choose up to 2 of your army markers, either from your player board or anywhere else on the main board already placed, and you move each of them to a region in your zone of interest, showing your flag in a small circle, or where you have a military base. We see how military bases are placed, and for each army moved you need to pay 5 coins. So if I move both 2 armies, I will need to pay 5 plus 5, a 10 total of coins. What does it mean, zone of interest? You see in this region there is a flag of China. Here in Africa there is no flag of China. So unless I have a country with a base there in Africa, I cannot move a marker to Africa, but I can move without a base in locations where I have my flag, East Asia Pacific if I'm China, and South Asia and Central Asia, for example. So I can spend 5 plus 5 to move 2 of my armies somewhere where I have the zone of interest and has my flag. Okay, I could also move it in a way that it's one from my produced army tokens, and let's say I already had it here and I want to move it from here to here, so from the board to another position. This is also a valid, legit movement. Since I moved 2, in any case I will need to pay 5 plus 5, 10. If I only moved 1, I will need to pay 5 for each one that you move. Okay, when something says get, in this card says get 1, that means you produce it. So I take it from the stock on the right side where I have my stock and I place it here, and then I can also move it because the movement is in the following keywords, as you can see on the card. Right now, another option would be for the valid destination for moving my army tokens would be either my zone of interest, the region has a flag, so it's zone of interest, or I have, let's say I had this country allied, Nigeria, it belongs to Africa, and I would have already built, we'll see how this is done, a base on this card. So this card is allied with me and I have a base. That means I'm allowed to move one of my army tokens here, even though I don't have my icon zone of interest, because I have already built a base in that region. Okay, so that's also very important. So if you want to expand in regions with military presence where you don't have your flag, you need to build bases, which is very thematic and of course makes total sense in this game. Right, so this is how you do the move. Okay, so let's see now how you do the build, which is the second action, to build the base, to use it for the purposes I described. So to build a base, this action allows you to build a military base on foreign soil, ensuring a permanent military presence on that region. So you choose a ready allied country in front of you with a military base symbol. So the previous example was a bit wrong because I couldn't build it in Nigeria because it doesn't have this symbol, just to be to be correct. Okay, I cannot build a base in Nigeria because it doesn't allow me to build a base here. There is only specific cards in the region that allow you, and you need to make sure you capture them before your opponents, okay, or they don't restrict them from you. So if I wanted to have a foothold for adding military presence in Africa, I need to have a ready country, so not exhausted, ready, and that country needs to have the possibility to add bases for my flag. So I can add the base here. I cannot add the base to Nigeria because there is no icon. Okay, so forget about what I said, but the example demonstrated before was incomplete. So I need to have a country, a ready country allied with me that has the possibility to build the base. Then I will need to spend money. I will need first to exhaust it, so I need to flip it face down, okay, for the round, to exhaust it, turn it face down, and then I place on top of that card, above my player board, a military base token as a reminder, and move an amount of army tokens up to that country's value, minimum of 1. Okay, so I can move military tokens. When I build base, I can also make movements up to its value. So it's value 1, so I can only move 1 military token from your player board to that country's region, or from another location. So not from your player board actually. So in any case, you pay a cost of 5 for building the base, plus 5 for each movement of army tokens you perform. You pay all this money and then you gain a military presence in that region. Okay, once you have already a base, you don't need to build again a base. Whenever you want, you can move, you can play again the move action in a future round, and then since you have a base in a country in that region, then you would be able to move normally with no problem to Africa, even though it doesn't have your symbol, your zone of interest. The last type of actions you have are the blue cards, which are domestic cards, which can be either a growth or produce, or having an option for doing both. So let's see how growth works. This action allows you to tackle the inner workings of your country, improving the way things work and leading to a more efficient form of governance. So you choose one of the available growth cards. Remember, the growth cards are these cards here. They start from 1. We have 2 for each number, so 2 1s, 2 2s, 2 3s, etc. So you select one. If it's your first time you do growth, you need to select a card with a value 1. If you already have a card of 1 or 2, or let's say you already have 1 and 2, then you need to select the value of 3, either of the two options face up. So when you do growth, you select one of these cards. Let me just get it again to focus on the anatomy. Okay, they have the level that you're allowed to select. This depends on what you have. You cannot go directly to 2 if you don't have 1, for example. And you choose one of the available growth cards. You pay its cost and place a card in front of you next to your player board. Then you gain the victory points listed on the card. So in this case, I would gain 2 victory points. And the first time you get a growth card, you need to take the level 1, as I said. Then each time you need to go from the next number to one number higher. These cards usually provide you with an ongoing ability that you can make use of it for the rest of the game, and of course the higher you go for the growth cards, so all the way up to 5, the more victory points you're going to gain. In order to acquire this card you need to pay the requirements, so you need to choose a card, place it in front of you, okay, you gain the victory points, but you need also to pay the requirements on the side here. Again, to make it clear, so to get this one I would need to pay 1 services and 1 diplomacy, but I will have this initiative diplomatic card, so whenever I focus I can ready an additional country card, very useful, and I will immediately gain 2 victory points. Very nice, interesting boosts that give you a lot of additional abilities and ways to improve your efficiency moving forward. So this is how you do growth, okay, but you need to remember to go one number higher. Let's say you want to do produce, because this card strategy allows you to do either growth or produce, okay, but you can have different combinations of cards from deck building. So if you do produce, when an effect instructs you to produce 1 or more resources, you may choose any of the 6 available resources, both primary and secondary. And if you choose a primary resource to produce energy, raw materials or food, you gain as many items as your production indicates. If you choose a secondary resource to produce consumable goods or services, diplomacy or armies, you gain up to the quantity your production allows, spending the necessary requirements from each resource produced. You need to spend the resources in order to gain the secondary resources. Note that when you produce multiple resources, you may choose any combination between primary and secondary resources. You are also allowed to use primary resources produced with the same action as a requirement for the secondary resources. And also remember that whenever you produce a resource that is listed on your commerce cards, you turn all these cards face up also. They represent products, produce resources that are have been allocated for use for trade later on. Okay, so very direct way to produce things that you want specifically and gain that resources for your future turns, and this is what the produce does. Now in this way you have seen all the type of actions: green diplomatic actions, red military actions, orange economic actions, and blue domestic actions that you can do. Okay, and these are all very nicely captured on the player aid. Now let's go and see how influence works, because it's a vital part of this game. Placing influence. Each region contains slots where your influence can be placed, meaning your cubes, with each slot indicating the amount of victory points immediately gained when doing so. There are 2 types of such icons, 2 slots. There are the permanent ones and the temporary ones. There are ones above the dotted line, so the ones that show 1 here on the first row are above the dotted line. These are the permanent ones in this example. Okay, they can have different configuration, and the ones below the dotted line, they typically have higher value numbers for more victory points, but these are the temporary ones. So how this works: the slots above the line are the permanent influence slots, squares, whatever you want to call them, and whenever you place an influence in that slot, the influence placed there will remain there. It's secure until the end of the game and no one can bump you. So let's say through my actions I place 1 of my cubes here, I will immediately score 1 victory point, and no one can remove this cube from there from me. But I also have the option to go to the, these are the permanent, I have the option to go to the temporary when placing. I decide to go there or there. If I go to the temporary on the bottom instead of the top, the permanent, then I typically score more victory points, in this case 5, as you can see. But what happens here is, once you, let's say, placed more and more cubes, okay, so as the bottom line below the dotted line is getting filled in, so the next time someone is going to place a cube there, they're going to bump me, okay, and this one is going to be removed, thus losing the presence for the majority in the whole region. But you cannot do that on the top line above the dotted line, which is the permanent slots / squares. So again, to capture it, The slots beneath the line are temporary influence slots. Whenever you place influence in one of those slots, it has to go to the first available slot on the left, and the VP you gain is most likely the higher number. However, when all these slots on the bottom line, the temporary ones, are covered and new influence needs to be placed, the leftmost influence is removed and the remaining cubes are all moved one space to the left. Then the new cube is then added to the rightmost slot and you don't gain any immediate points. Also keep in mind that when majorities are checked in each region, we'll see how this scoring is done, all influence cubes count in the determining who has the most presence regarding if they are regardless if they are temporary or permanent, regardless if they are above or below the dotted line. They all count towards majority at that stage of the scoring. Okay. However, for a region to score, it needs to have all of the permanent influence slots covered. If it doesn't, then the region won't score at this point. So in this case, this region will not score because the permanent slots are not covered. But if the permanent slots above the dotted line, together with the pre-printed that they go through the start of the setup, were filled, in this case, even in this case, okay, all the permanent ones are filled, okay, then what happens in any case, let's say it's like that, the region is going to score because all the permanent spots, squares above the dotted line are filled in. That means that this region is eligible for scoring during end of third round and during end of sixth round. So drawing cards also, if any effect instructs you to draw cards during the action phase and there are no longer any cards in the draw deck because let's say it has been depleted, that means that you shuffle the cards in your discard pile but not the cards in front of you that you have played in this round. This will be done, go to the discard at the end, and then you form a new deck to continue drawing. There is also the term trashing cards. When you trash a card, you return it back to the box or set it aside. It no longer can be used in the rest of the game. Now the second step of the action phase is after we finish playing the cards, 4 cards or 4 actions, it's the research. After you have all players have 4 turns, the action step is over. You're now given the opportunity to research new cards and add them to your deck, on top of your deck. First, all of the players place all the action cards in front of you to the discard pile. Then you reveal the remaining cards in your hand, typically going to be 2. In the beginning you start with 6, so if you play 4 cards, that means that you're going to be left over with 2 cards at the end of the action phase during the research. When you do that, you take and add from the 2 remaining cards the amount of coins, so in this case 4 plus 6, 10, so I gain 10 coins that I get from the bank as an income. And also in my remaining cards I also count the magnifying glasses, so that in this case 2 plus 1, 3, that means I have 3 research points to spend to gain new cards. Keeping also in mind that if you have played domestic focus, you also have permanently 2 additional magnifying glasses at the end of the research turn. So let's say I had that already done, so 3 plus 2, 5. That means I can buy any of these cards from the market. For example, either the military exercises, which costs 4 to buy, or the negotiations, successful negotiation costs 4 to buy, or the government bonds, which cost 4 to 5. I cannot buy return of investment because it costs 6, neither the additional ones which cost 7. Okay, of course I can buy more than 1 card if I have enough produced temporary enough magnifying glasses from this process, so I can gain more cards and add them on top of my deck. They will be available for me to draw on the next round during my hand, for my hand. Again, I have placed these cards face up just to squeeze them in my playing area because I don't have a large table, but these are going to be a market row, a draw deck on the left, and 6 cards revealed below the main board. And whenever you get a new card, you move the cards on the left where it was, 1 space to the right, and immediately you reveal a new card to the leftmost available position. You may get as many of new cards as you have research for, and each card you get does go on the top of your deck, as I mentioned. You discard any reveal cards, your reveal cards afterwards, and this concludes the research step once all players have done it. Again, keep in mind that this is done, of course, in the turn order. Now, after we finish the second phase, which is the action phase, both the action turns and the research turn, we proceed to the aftermath. The aftermath, as you can see, has a series of steps. So in this phase you deal with the consequences of your actions, your investments pay off, and your army presence has the effect on your opponents. This is also the phase in which scoring happens. The aftermath consists of the following steps. First, we have the get return on investments. So that's the get return on investment step here, and for every allied country you have in front of you with an investment, the FTI token, that means, that's why you have a 3 number here, you gain 3 coins as a return of your investment. Then you increase the prosperity. The prosperity, as you see, is on your player board. So this is the prosperity marker you see here. This step is where you get to increase your prosperity. You may pay the amount of consumable goods progressively more, so 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 to progress to the next available space. You can only progress one step, regardless if you have more consumables to pay, so only one step is allowed. So in this case I could pay 2 consumables to gain 2 victory points and 10 coins, and then I would move there. I cannot progress more even if I had additionally 3 consumables to do so. The next thing you do is you do the add the auto influence. Again, I remind you, this is the auto influence deck. Okay, so if you're playing with 4 players, you skip this step. Otherwise, you take the influence cubes from the 2 revealed auto influence cards and place them in the region listed next to them. And if any army markers are shown there next to the region names, you place also auto army markers of the same color of those regions. Okay, so this is the auto influence step. And keep in mind that when adding influence in a region this way, if there is a permanent influence slot available, place it in that slot. Otherwise, you place it in the available temporary slot. Then also keep in mind that you have to draw 2 new auto influence cards. For every roll that is not taken by any actual player, you place influence cubes of that roll color on the cards themselves. So you don't place them on the board, you know, you just place them on the card so that you know what's upcoming at the aftermath phase of the next round. Okay, so you know what to prepare accordingly. And you can also place army tokens if they are indicated on the same row, and these cubes indicate where influence will be added at the aftermath of the next phase, as I mentioned. Then the next step that we do is we resolve threat. Remember, during the course of the game and through the actions, we were adding on the different areas, okay, we were adding army tokens. So let's say North Africa here, for example, okay. So through our moving actions and building bases, military red actions. So this step, the resolve threat, is a step where during this step each player checks to see the military presence of their opponent in their zone of interest, usually the regions next to their borders. That means the EU player has a zone of interest, Africa, because it has the flag there. So for EU, this is a zone of interest, and then that EU needs to check if there are any army tokens on their zones of influence. The next thing that happens, so each player checks their regions that include their flag and loses 2 victory points for every other player who has more armies than them there. In this case, for example, a EU player has less armies than it's a zone of interest, so China has 2 armies there, so EU player yellow will lose 2 victory points. But let's say, for the sake of example, we had also 3 armies there from the blue player. That means that the yellow player EU would lose 2 for the blue player and 2 for the red, a total of 4 victory points, because there are players, 2 for each player, that have more armies than them, more tank tokens on the zones of interest. Okay, and this goes for every single zone. Keep in mind that the USA and EU both have the member of NATO special ability on the player board and then on their player aid, which allows them to ignore threat from each other. In this case, means that EU would not lose 2 victory points from the US because of the special ability. They will only use 2 from China. But if it goes instead of this, if we had 3 from the Russian player, then they would indeed lose 2 plus 2 for victory points respectively. Then we proceed with the scoring of the regions. Now, this takes place only in the end of the third. That's why it's highlighted the box here, and at the end of the 6th round. So 2 scorings, in the middle and at the end of the game. During scoring, only regions that have all of their permanent influence slots filled get to scored. That means in this case Africa will not score, but if it goes like that, let's say, it would score because all of their permanent slots above the dotted line are filled. That means that this is eligible for scoring and it will score. Scoring is very straightforward. During scoring, only regions that have all of their permanent influence slots filled get to score, and for each of such region you count each player's influence cubes there, and they all get 1 victory point per influence cube they have. Then the player with the most influence cubes gets the majority bonus listed on the bottom right corner, the next player with the most influence gets the second, and so on. In this case, the red player is going to get 2 victory points and the yellow player is going to get 1 victory point, and in addition, since the red player is first, so they're going to gain 7 victory points, they have more, and the yellow player you is going to get 4 more victory points. And you do this for each eligible region which has all of their permanent slots filled in and they are eligible for scoring, okay, one by one. In case of a tie, the VP bonus goes to the player with the most armies in that region. If there is still a tie, all tied players get the bonus of the lowest position among them, and this is how you resolve ties. And this is how scoring is done. After all regions are scored and checked and VP are awarded, you check for the 3 majority tokens for most tanks, most armies, most coins, most money, and most allied countries. So again, you gain 6, 3, and 1, or if you're playing with 2 players, only the first player scores, the second scores nothing, okay? So the player who has the most army tokens gains 6, the second most 3, and the third 1. For the amount of coins they have in their possession, 5, 3, and 1, and for the amount of allied countries in front of them, 7, 4, and 2. In case of a tie, for these 3 majorities, all tied players get the points of the lowest position among them. And this is how actually the scoring for the majority tile works. And last point to remind is that USA has an additional ability that applies during the step of the scoring, which is called superpower overstretch. In each scoring, count the number of regions in which USA has the most influence or is tied for the most. If that number is less than 4, it gets the corresponding penalty, which is captured also on their player board, you see, depending on the level. They can typically lose -2 or even -4, exceptionally -6 or -8 victory points, which is their special ability because they are more, let's say, prepared. So this is how scoring happens at the end of the 3rd round and at the end of the 6th round, which is the end of the game. Game end. The player with the most victory points at the end is the winner. In case of a tie, the winner is the player among those tied which has the majority in the most regions on the board, and if there are still tied players, the player among them with the most influence cubes in total is a winner. If there is still a tie, players share the victory. And there you have it. This is everything you need to know on how to play World Order. Let's meet back up for my final impressions about the game. So there you have it. This is how the game plays in practice. You've seen all the details. I've been very detailed and scholastic so that you can find all the details, essentially replace the rules and see exactly how the game plays. Now, there are so many things I loved about the game, and I think this game is going to be one for your library. At least it's one for my library for sure, and it's one that is going to get a lot of plays. I have already played it a lot, even as in the prototype, advanced prototype mode. I've brought it in many gatherings already, and I keep seeing myself bringing it more and more and playing it more and more down the road, even before it's published, until I have the final production in my hands of the version of the game. The game has some really excellent design mechanics that they feel robust. They're straightforward and streamlined, so you have area majority, but there is a small twist. For example, you see that you have the temporary and the permanent cubes for influence, and this is important because you can either go for low risk, low reward, or high risk, high reward. So if you go for the temporary positions for the influence for your cubes, if it's filled in, they may be bumped, and then you lose cubes out of the influence pool, which affects the majority. Simple, elegant design, but very, very well executed. Another thing I liked about the game is the multi-use cards. There is deck building in the game, because at the end of the game, another fantastic option aspect of the game is that you have 6 cards. You're going to play 4. The 2 that you select are giving you an income, because based on what it's left over on your hands, you're going to discard them and get research points so that you can buy more cards essentially from the market, and coins. A really nice mechanic, because you may don't want to play the cards, or you want to play the cards, but you also want to keep some high value cards for buying better, having better income at the end of your round, and so on. Really, really well done. And the cards themselves, they're very nice because they have multi-use. The cards that they fall in different categories, military, domestic, economic, etc., and the color coding is exceptional. By the way, I loved the fact that the color palette, I don't know how you call it, was the same like Hegemony. This game, even it's never mentioned anywhere, you can see the same nice, clear colors, different colors, the orange, the red, the green, etc., from Hegemony into World Order, and felt some kind of familiar, I got some sense of familiar feeling from this, because they work really well from aesthetics point of view and having clarity in that game. So really they work here also similarly well. The other thing that I loved about the game is the player interaction. Boy, this game has a lot of interaction, and I mean not only from pushing players, triggering them, because if you move military army markers into their zones of interest, they have to reply, because it's like putting a needle in their, and bothering them, because every end of the round they will be losing 2 victory points per player that has more army tokens from you. And this gives a nice push and pull effect. It's not in a war game in a way that there is no battle between the army markers, but it really puts pressure and may shift interest and focus mandatorily or voluntarily from players, from what they're trying to do if someone is pushing them in their neighborhood or in the zone of interest, in the regions that they have interest in the flag, essentially, as you've seen. The other thing that I really loved is how you can interact in terms of trade, in terms of buying from other players. The assets are fantastic. There are 2 high boost actions, very, very thematic per player, that you get out of a pool of 5. And as you've seen, you can spend the card, not use the card, and just boom, flip the asset and do the really powerful boost. And at the correct time, it can have a great difference and a great value for your gameplay and your chances of winning the game. I also like the growth concept, moving from 1 to 2 to 3 to all the way to 5, to get abilities essentially that give you ongoing effects and can boost you and also reward a lot of points. The focus is another thing that I really, really enjoyed. You have your primary resources, as you've seen, and you have your secondary or whatever resources on the second tier. But these are produced based on the use of primary resources that you need to have in order to expend them, and do as much production as you have your markers high up on their respective tracks. The consumables, the diplomatic services, how they call diplomacy in the services, etc. Really, really well done. And the fact that you also select your focus, either to be domestic, either to be military, or trading. It's fantastic, because it gives you a small direction and boost in one of these 3 fields, which is thematic in my way. I mean, imagine a country, a nation, a superpower, whatever. They cannot be full on diplomacy, full on military, full on domestic focus. It doesn't work. I mean, if focus is one, you focus somewhere. And this game really gave me this impression, like a simulation, a simple but well designed, with a lot of depth, geopolitical simulation, with a lot of thematic aspects and ties, and great gameplay. This is how I would summarize my impressions from the game. I played on tabletop, I played on physical copy, I played with different player counts. I really enjoyed. I heard that there's going to be a solo. I really was hoping to be a solo, so I'm very much looking forward for this. I haven't tried or don't have any idea of how the solo is going to work, but it's going to be an automa. The game scales really well, because you have the auto influence deck, and if you're playing with less than 4 power characters, major powers, you just use a deck to give more pressure or squeezeness, I don't know how you call it, tightness, with the tanks and the army markers and the influence cubes from powers that players have not selected, if you're playing 3-player game or 2-player game. So everything in this game is really well designed. I highly recommend it. I had a blast about it. It's one of a kind. It's going to be a smash hit, mark my words. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't make sure to visit the Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign link so that you can register and get notified as soon as the game starts. This is a fantastic game to be playing, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to have an early copy and try it for myself, and I can't wait for people to find out more about World Order.